Hello everybody, my name is Roland Romano. I came here today on behalf of the Austrian Cyclist Lobby. We are an NGO and a non-profit organization without any political party associations. I will tell you today something about the requirements in cities that have a movable topology and show you some Austrian and some international examples. We are, as the Cyclist Union, have about 7,000 members in Austria itself. We do services as cycle courses and EU projects. For example, we are the Eurovelo Coordination Center for Austria. When we look at the Austrian topography, we are in the middle of the Alps. And I show you the 4 cities with the highest model shares. Of course, they are in the very flat parts of the country. Where we do not have a lot of topology. That is already one hint across the myth that hills or inclines are a main barrier for cycling. If we look on Vienna itself, the capital, the western part is quite hilly, the eastern part is very flat. And if we compare the topography on the left side, these are the flatter districts with the districts on the right side which have over average cycling shares. They are not congruent, not ident completely. And if you compare the districts and their properties, then those districts are the most densely built districts with the narrowest streets, the highest inhabitants per square kilometer, and they have a very low-speed street system. In those districts, 30 kilometers per hour is the main street limit that was introduced in the last 20 years, and only the main streets, mostly between the districts, are 50 kilometers per hour. And on the right side, you see the biggest district, the 22nd district. It's very flat. And because there are not a lot of buildings, you have very wide roads and over-proportionally bicycle paths, which you do not have in the other districts, central districts. Hilliness, the effects of hilliness are mostly overestimated. I show you 2 quotes of one of a very interesting project. I will talk about it later. Where they compared the cycling numbers in England, in the UK, with the cycling numbers in Holland, in the Dutch countries, and then they changed the cycle model shares to simulate what would happen if the UK was as flat as the Netherlands. And there the cycling model share increased from 1.7 to 2.6%, and that does not explain at all completely the differences. It leaves a vast percentage of the increase unexplained, if only hilliness was a factor. And another work of Theresa Maywald at the University of Dortmund said the effects are lower than previously estimated, but especially on the side of the users or of the decision makers. The effects of hilliness are as estimated. That means that there is a lot of prejudice, a lot of thinking that cycling could not happen because of some hills. So what is the summary of this factor? Topographic measures are not a key factor, are not a baseline of cycling increasement, but rather a nice add-on on a very strong basis of your bicycle concept. You need political engagement to put the target of increased cycle traffic in place, have a cycling concept built out of experts and budgets, and then there are 3 main criteria: a low-stress cycling infrastructure network where people can get from A to B without having fear, public relations to put cycling as a likely mode of transport, and services that ease cycling. At the end, I will talk to you about the topographic specific measures in Austria or abroad. The project I want to talk to you about is the Propensity to Cycle tool. It's a website tool, open source and free to use, did by Rachel Aldred. and their colleagues. And basically, it's an online tool in a geographic input. You have the computer data set. It's a matrix of origins and destinations of commuters. The second is the topography of the country, and the routing tool, which puts the origin destination matrix into route choices of cyclists themselves. And what you then get out is a network of journeys that are most likely to switch to cycling based on 3 scenarios. One scenario is the baseline you already have, is the percentage of cycling share based on the distance. As you know, short trips are very likely to be cycled, and long trips are less likely with this function. And the second factor is the propensity by gradient. The more steep a cycle journey is, the less likely people are to cycle. And in these 2 factors, 3 scenarios were done. One is the baseline, the status quo. One is the Go Dutch scenario, where they estimated what would happen if people cycled as much as in Holland. And the third scenario is what we heard already about e-bikes. What would happen if people chose e-bikes instead of non-motorized bicycles? And you see clearly that the high gradient numbers are higher than without motorized. This is what the tool looks like in their map view. You have the origin destination matrix with direct lines. Those lines are put down via the routing tools on actual streets. And if you visualize that with the potential cyclists there, this looks like this. And after you did this analysis, it's very easy to see which roads, which streets would be more important to improve. As this tool is hilliness sensitive, it also shows fast routes and quiet routes, because as we know, people take sometimes detours to avoid inclines, and this tool shows you which fast route would be the optimum infrastructure measure to avoid some detours, for example, in this region. To come to the cycling concept, the baseline should be low-stress infrastructure. And by low-stress infrastructure, that means to avoid inclines, if possible. I will come to that later if it's not possible. And differentiate between the functions. You cannot build the same infrastructure on the main road as on the side road. On the side roads, you should opt for cycle streets, calmed traffic with mixed traffic. And on the main roads, do not mix traffic. You have to separate the bicycle path from the main carriage, because especially in inclines or at high speed differences, people won't cycle if there's too much stress by overtaking or close passing cars. To avoid inclines, we did in Vienna a lot, is to open one-way streets with counterflow cycling. A very easy measure. It mostly consists of added signs below the entry forbidden sign. The national guideline in Austria says you need about 3.5 meters of carriageway between parked cars to open it. And it's possible if there's a low speed zone, for example, 30 kilometers per hour, and a certain number of cars, you can go down to about 3 meters between the parked cars. Other countries as Belgium are further in this topic and open streets already from 2.8 meters. And this is a very easy measure. You can see mostly we concentrate on streets with inclines, but this measure is one you can do on the surrounding streets which don't have as steep inclines to offer detours, offer other alternative routes. The second measure is to reduce barriers, pedestrian zones or similar forbidden zones for cyclists are big barriers. If you can open these, you can offer alternatives to some inclines, maybe on the parallel high road. This is the Marilferstraße in Vienna, a very famous street. 3 years before now, you there had 50 kilometers per hour speed limit, 2 driving lanes in one driving lane in each direction, 2 in total, and 2 parking lanes. And all pedestrian traffic took place at these small sidewalks behind these benches. Low-stress cycling route. If you cannot offer an alternative route and you have to put the cyclist on the main incline because of some geographic needs, I have brought an example here. It's here the Danube Canal, here a train station, very big one, and this is the main straight line to a very big university campus on the hill. And what was done in this area of the street, before it looked like this, 50 kilometers per hour limit, some parking, but most of these houses have parking on their own space, but they use public spaces, and bidirectional traffic for cars, 1 bus lane going from uphill, downhill. And it was changed last year into this street layout. No parking on the green spaces anymore to protect the trees. 1 parking lane on the other side, and a traffic filter which made the road into a one-direction road, one-way road with counterflow cycling. And this is a very nice effect. Riding downhill, you do not have any overtaking cars because of the little speed differences. And if you go uphill, you basically do not have any danger of dooring. It's very limited because you can see the door right next to you, and the driver can see you, and you do not you also do not have any overtaking or similar. This street layout was done in the 50 kilometers per hour limit. It's still 50 kilometers per hour, and there is a local initiative now to change that limit to 30 kilometers per hour because it's much safer. One factor is the bus. We have a very strong public transport in Vienna, and also the transport company is strong in political questions, and they argue a lot with traffic time losses if they would not be allowed to travel 50 kilometers per hour. But it's one resistance which you can overcome with some measurement of the actual speeds, and those speeds are typically not so high that you would have high traffic time losses. Another street layout on the Lidlgasse, in the near area of this previous example. It's the same hill going on this direction. This was the street layout before 2017. 4 lanes, 50 kilometers per hour zone, and about 20,000 cars per day. This street layout was changed into the one on the right side. There are 2 activists celebrating the opening of this new cycle path. 1 car lane was reduced, and for this area, the city introduced 2 cycle paths separated from the main carriageway. This is one example where there were not any detours possible. Here is a park which is densely populated and not allowed to cycle on, and here you have public transport repair center where you also do not have any opportunities to go through. It was a very controversial project, but the main cycle route there, and very important. Here I show you an example of a cycle route that is also on the main incline, where there are possibilities to go around, but the possibilities look exactly like this. So there's not much sense in going around. This is the Sternwartestraße in Vienna, also going on this main hill in the north part of the city. And this is one street that looked like this 2 years ago without the cycling symbol, and was a 2-way street for cars with 50 kilometers per hour limit. So it was a very old layout and would not be allowed today anymore. The district introduced car parking fees, and for this system in Vienna you need a marking of the car parking spaces, which was not there before. And with the marking they had to do a new regulation of the whole street, and they had to change it into a one-way street. You see the small sign here. And this one-way street was opened for cyclists in the other direction, or kept open. And so you still have the opportunity to go uphill without any overtaking cars. And this street has only a limit of 3 meters opening between the parked cars. There was a special study made how this would work. They counted cars, they counted cyclists, they counted the speed of cars and cyclists, and made an estimation how often some of the traffic participants would have to wait for each other. And they came to the conclusion that there are enough car parking spaces opening for garages or intersections, so that these halts in order to let someone pass are very unoften or improbable. And so the cycle route could be kept here without bigger changes, without big investments, and now it's much easier to cycle uphill because of very little negotiation between car traffic. Before you had also a problem here with through-going traffic in a very small road, which was not built for this purpose, and now car through traffic avoids this area completely because these are 40 blocks in the same layout, and they improve the high road around it, so the car traffic also goes around this area now, and you have very little interactions with moving cars. I made one slide with the bad things. This is this one. Things to avoid on inclines. There are bidirectional cycle paths. Keep one-way cycle paths because of the reduced complex situations at intersections. Avoid any minimum widths of cycling provision. Critical lane widths between 4 meters and 3 meters. No dooring zone parking cycle lanes. Avoid complex priority situations. Avoid densely populated urban space. So when I talked before about pedestrian zones, only open then if this is compatible and not if they are overcrowded. And if concentrating on downhill, do not use shared use paths because of the speed differences of pedestrians and cyclists. Those are not accepted or not low stress infrastructure. Especially pedestrian zones, and unnecessary stops. It's an easy measure to introduce yield signs or stop signs for the other traffic if you want to keep the physical energy of cyclists going downhill. And uphill is the problem. Avoid any mixed traffic with high car volumes. What you can do about public relations, an example from Vienna, is the so-called city bike uphill challenge. We have the city bike system in Vienna of 140 stations. And the city bike uphill challenge consists of a contest where users can gain points in height meters, and these are summed up for 1 month. In this 1 month, 51 kilometers of meters in height were cycled, and this uphill cycling avoided in total over 120 truck movals of bikes. I show you this picture because they also offer a height map of their stations, and you can look if I want to go to the West train station. This is this part of Vienna. How many points can I get if I start at one of these stations? And of course, here are none points gained because this area is even higher than the train station. And interesting fact is, if the people go back and ride downhill again, these points are subtracted from the meters before. And this is the winner of this contest of 1 week. This is the enterprise chef, and the winner won this nice bicycle, which was transferred in a big celebration. In public relations, we can also do ask people why they don't cycle and tell them why they don't cycle. To explain by the interviews what are the main barriers. And if you look onto this graph, it's from the Viennese bicycle account. It's made every second year. This year is the last one, the actual one. They ask about 2,000 people, how they feel about cycling in Vienna, what are the main barriers, and why they don't cycle. And these are the answers. I translated them here. Not owning a bicycle, or not owning one anymore. Fear of traffic, car traffic, some health issues. And down the line, if you have something like physical effort, hilliness, and that says, yeah, it's not the main issue in Vienna. We should concentrate on these four, and these you can really cover good with the three basic elements of a cycle concept: infrastructure, public relations, and some service. Coming to service, I brought to you an example of Germany, of Neustadt in der Weinstraße, where they introduced a cyclist signage here that also offers alternative ones. There's a symbol of the percentage of the incline of this route, and the same finishes, the same directions are on a second sign without the warning of the incline, but with higher kilometer counts. If you talk about signing and you do not want to cover the city with signs in total, you can also offer an official bike routing system. We have that in Vienna by the company Bike Citizens. And some of the routing companies offer apps which are hilliness sensitive. So you can tick a box, for example, if you ride with a cargo bike or with a non-motorized bike and you want to avoid steep inclines, that your routing app already tells you the most easy to go routes. Service, people don't have to cycle everywhere. They can also use public transport. In Vienna we have a very strong public transport, I told already, and it's allowed to take your bicycle on all subways and on all trains if it's not crowded and you can't get in. In the metro, it's allowed at off-peak hours. So, for example, in the morning rush hour from 7 to 9, it's forbidden, and in the afternoon from about 4 to 6, because then the subways are so crowded that it's not acceptable to negotiate because there's no much room for bicycles. And coming to the room for bicycles, some cities in Vienna, is also one country, offers subsidies for folding bicycles. It's a very cheap measure to persuade people of buying a folding bike, which you can carry in all public transport in Vienna and all Austria, because it's counted as a luggage area. So also in small buses or trams, it's allowed to carry these bicycles. In Steiermark, one of the southern countries, you get a 25% investment incentive of your investment up to 500 euros. And in Vorarlberg, they have a very interesting initiative. You get 30% of the investment worth as a coupon on a public transport time card.
Does it apply to e-bikes?
If the folding bike is an e-bike, yes. Mm-hmm. But it has to be a folding bike to count as luggage. When we come to e-bikes, there's one national incentive covering 500 euros for e-bikes, with one specialty in Austria, that 50% have to be given by the seller of the e-bike, where these amounts have to be written on the receipt, on the bill itself, and then the ministry gives the other 50%, so it doubles this amount. I cannot say that this system works very well, because of course the seller is in a conflict of interest in the moment of selling the e-bike. I would advise to use a system based on higher shares of ministry money, up to 100% of subsidy, because these are easier to distribute in the population, and also the seller associations are more likely to tell people that they have an incentive running without losing personally any money. They rather gain money. Other cities or smaller countries offer a incentive of 30%, covering 100 to 500 euros. And the interesting part is that those incentives are not excluded each other. So people can get an incentive of the national level, then they go to the country, get a incentive of the country level, and maybe the city even subsidies bicycles in their region. And in total, sometimes it's possible to get up to 1,000 euro incentive if you combine those three levels. One interesting part of the e-bikes is also that they're very liked as job bicycle. Do you have this system of job bicycles in Czech Republic? Not yet. So I will explain it in one moment, one sentence. It's basically a bicycle, or in this case, an e-bicycle that is leased by the company or bought by the company, and the employee has the allowance to use this bicycle for business cases, but also for private cases. And the worth of this bicycle is legally counted as part of the money remuneration for the employee. And this has two main effects. One effect is that the employees are bound to the companies, so they will stay longer in the company, and the knowledge of these employees stay in the company. And the other effect is that this part of legal remuneration is also beneficial in tax issues. So in total you pay less tax, you get more of the money than not using this scheme. For us, for some it seems strange or bizarre, but this issue is in place for cars for the last 30 or 40 years in Austria. It's very common that people have business cars, and these also count as part of the remuneration. When we come to topographic measures, I brought to you some examples of Vienna and whole Austria that are especially addressing topographic problems. In Vienna we have a lot of public transport, and because it changes, also a lot of old train tracks in the city which are not used anymore. Sometimes they are used as parks, and in these cases 2 of these train tracks were used as a bicycle and pedestrian path. On the left side you have the Danube Canal. Here's the city center cathedral, and this ramp is very flat, not very steep, and connects to the example I brought to you before between the train station and the university uphill. It's one main route uphill, and between this example and the one before is this special building, the so-called Skywalk. It was built 10 years ago between the Danube Canal and the 19th district on this place, which has a very complex situation of public transport lines, car lanes, new buildings that were built in the place, and this is the main subway area. There was basically no way to cross this area. You had to cross 5 traffic lights, 1 bridge, and then go around some parts. And this skywalk is a pedestrian and bicycle bridge that connects the Danube Canal with the 19th district. And this is today the most important connection of the district to the Danube Canal, because other streets are steeper or covered by car traffic. The bridge looks like this. It goes between all those bigger bridges and main roads without any intersections. And this example I brought to you because it's so famous and so very intensely used that there are now also discussions about how to improve this bridge, how to make it wider, because there are too many pedestrians and bicyclists now on this bridge. Another example is in Salzburg, where there's one big mountain in the city center. Here you have the city center and some suburbs, and they built a tunnel, pedestrian and bicycle tunnel through this big hill already about 40 years ago. A basic system are asymmetric street layouts. If you have an incline, try to use a more high quality infrastructure uphill. and maybe a not so high quality bike lane downhill. I would not advise to use these lanes downhill on the side of a car, parked car, because of the door zone. But as a asymmetric layout, Austrian guidelines advise asymmetric layouts from 3% on, because of the different speeds going uphill and downhill. Another nice specific provision for hills are stacking spaces. These are also two cycle paths that were built on an incline. If you ride uphill and you have to wait at the red light, the cycle path is wider than in the line, and so fast cyclists can overtake. The last one example I brought to you is a connection of two main cycle routes. The Ammonstiege in Vienna, here you have a river in Vienna, and here is the Marilferstraße pedestrian zone I showed to you before. The small gray lines are the height lines, and you see that there's a very steep incline, and on the center of this place, the city built a staircase for pedestrians, and it was later fitted with an elevator. And if this elevator is bicycle compatible, then cyclists can easily go very flat here, take the elevator and ride flat here, and they arrive at a higher level easily. The last point I want to make is that hills cannot be overcome with some technical infrastructure. They can be eased, but what you want, or what you should try to reach, is some joy in riding bicycles, children and elderly, and organized civil community. I'm happy to hear or to see the crowd here, organized by Automat. And a strong civil organization is one of the key factors in overcoming hilliness and in overcoming little cycling model shares. I want to finish with one sentence. After every hill, you can enjoy the decline. And with that, I finish my presentation. Thank you.